A curious urge to relive my stay there with Lolita had got hold of me. I was entering a phase of existence where I had given up all hope of tracing her kidnapper and her. I now attempted to fall back on old settings in order to save what still could be saved in a way of souvenir. Souvenir, comme veux-tu? Autumn was ringing in the air. To a postcard requesting twin beds, Professor Hamburg got a prompt expression of regret in reply. They were full up. They had one bathless basement room with 4 beds which they thought I would not want. Their notepaper was headed, "The Enchanted Hunters, near churches, no dogs, all legal beverages." I wondered if this last statement was true. All? Did they have, for instance, sidewalk grenadine? I also wondered if a hunter, enchanted or otherwise, would not need a pointer more than a pew. And with a spasm of pain I recalled a scene worthy of a great artist, Petite nymphe accroupie. But that silky cocker-spaniel had perhaps been a baptized one. No, I felt I could not endure the throes of revisiting that lobby. There was a much better possibility of retrievable time elsewhere in soft, rich-coloured autumnal Bryceland. Leaving Rita in a bar, I made for the town library. A twittering spinster was only too glad to help me disinter mid-August 1947 from the bound Bryceland Gazette, and presently, in a secluded nook under a naked light, I was turning the enormous and fragile pages of a coffin-black volume almost as big as Lolita. Reader, Bruder, what a foolish Hamburg that Hamburg was. Since his super-sensitive system was loath to face the actual scene, he thought he could at least enjoy a secret part of it. Which reminds one of the 10th or 20th soldier in the raping queue, who throws the girl's black shawl over her white face so as not to see those impossible eyes while taking his military pleasure in the sad, sacked village. What I lusted to get was the printed picture that had chanced to absorb my trespassing image while the Gazette's photographer was concentrating on Dr. Braddock and his group. Passionately I hoped to find preserved the portrait of the artist as a younger brute. An innocent camera catching me on my dark way to Lolita's bed. What a magnet for mnemosyne! I cannot well explain the true nature of that urge of mine. It was allied, I suppose, to that swooning curiosity which impels one to examine with a magnifying glass bleak little figures, still life practically, and everybody about to throw up, at an early morning execution, and the patient's expression impossible to make out in the print. Anyway, I was literally gasping for breath, and one corner of the Book of Doom kept stabbing me in the stomach while I scanned and skimmed. Brute Force and Possessed were coming on Sunday the 24th to both theatres. Mr. Purdham, independent tobacco auctioneer, said that ever since 1925 he had been an Omen Faustum smoker. Husky Hank and his petite bride were to be the guests of Mr. and Mrs. Reginald G. Gore, 58 Inchkeith Avenue. The size of certain parasites is 1/6 of the host. Dunkirk was fortified in the 10th century. Mrs. Socks, 39 cents. Saddle Oxford's 3.98. Wine, 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 quipped the author of Dark Age, who refused to be photographed, may suit a Persian bubble bird, but I say give me rain, rain, rain on the shingle roof for roses and inspiration every time. Dimples are caused by the adherence of skin to the deeper tissues. Greeks repulse a heavy gorilla assault. At last, a little figure in white, and Dr. Braddock in black, but whatever spectral shoulder was brushing against his ample form, nothing of myself could I make out. I went to find Rita, who introduced me with her vain, triste smile to a pocket-sized, wizened, truculently tight old man, saying this was, what was the name again, son? A former schoolmate of hers. He tried to retain her, and in the slight scuffle that followed I hurt my thumb against his hard head. In the silent painted park where I walked her and aired her a little, she sobbed and said I would soon leave her as everybody had, and I sang her a wistful French ballad and strung together some fugitive rhymes to amuse her. The place was called Enchanted Hunters. Query, what Indian dyes, Diana, did thy dell endorse to make a picture lake a very bloodbath of trees before the Blue Hotel? She said, why blue when it is white? Why blue, for heaven's sake, and started to cry again. And I marched her to the car, and we drove on to New York. And soon she was reasonably happy again, high up in the haze on the little terrace of our flat. I notice I have somehow mixed up two events. My visit with Rita to Bryceland on our way to Cantrip, and our passing through Bryceland again on our way back to New York. But such suffusions of swimming colours are not to be disdained by the artist in recollection. My letterbox in the entrance hall belonged to the type that allows one to glimpse something of its contents through a glassed slit. Several times already, a trick of harlequin light that fell through the glass upon an alien handwriting had twisted it into a semblance of Lolita's script, causing me almost to collapse as I leant against an adjacent urn, almost my own. Whenever that happened, whenever her lovely, loopy, childish scrawl was horribly transformed into the dull hand of one of my few correspondents, I used to recollect with anguished amusement the times in my trustful pre-DeLorean past when I would be misled by a jewel-bright window opposite wherein my lurking eye, the ever-alert periscope of my shameful vice, would make out from afar a half-naked nymphette stilled in the act of combing her Alice in Wonderland hair. There was in the fiery phantasm a perfection which made my wild delight also perfect, just because the vision was out of reach, with no possibility of attainment to spoil it by the awareness of an appended taboo. Indeed, it may well be that the very attraction immaturity has for me lies not so much in the limpidity of pure young forbidden fairy child beauty, as in the security of a situation where infinite perfections fill the gap between the little given and the great promised. The great rose-grey never to be had. Mes fenêtres. Hanging above blotched sunset and welling night, grinding my teeth, I would crowd all the demons of my desire against the railing of a throbbing balcony. It would be ready to take off in the apricot and black humid evening, did take off, whereupon the lighted image would move, and Eve would revert to a rib. And there would be nothing in the window but an obese, partly clad man reading the paper.